I made a princess bird canopy for my daughter's bed because I wanted something beautiful, but I felt like I couldn't put a classic canopy so close to curtains. I rummaged around on Pinterest till I found this, which is giving very much Cinderella bird vibes, especially because of the light blue. In fact, a lot of the early princesses had birds, especially adept at carrying fabric around to draw inspiration from. In Cinderella, they're quite classically princessy, but they're a more woodland vibe in Snow White or Sleeping Beauty. And while I do adore Disney princess birds, we also love ornithology in this house, and so I wanted to add just a dash of an Audubon vibe and find something a bit more scientifically accurate than the animated counterparts, though I love a bird doing chores. And I will admit, watching these back, I am surprised and quite impressed with the variety of species they've got going on here. I myself wanted to feature a crow, a chickadee, a pigeon, and a bluebird. Plus, I added a yellowbird just for, color balance. And was that the second time birds have independently rung something out? Then the problem became searching for a pattern for these birds, and I had a surprisingly hard time. Most of the birds were 2D, but I needed them flying so they could hold up the canopy, and I wanted them pretty realistic looking. Not that the other options aren't cute, just not the vibe. The best I could find was this pattern on Etsy. It comes with 3 different birds who were pretty similar, but it was far and away the best on the market so far. Before I got too crazy with all my different species, I wanted to make sure I understood the pattern well. I printed it off and did this one by the book, the yellow one. It's made of a top piece and 2 tummy pieces. I made it out of felt and a blanket stitch for that perfect quintessential childhood look and, frankly, ease of making. The second bird, my eastern bluebird, was also by the book. I did it exactly the same, except I added a couple of color blocking pieces. It's a simple change, but still fundamentally the same shape and process, and I made a TikTok video of each of these birds. And by the time the second one was finished, I felt like I understood the pattern well enough that I could go ahead and make some more drastic changes to the shape and size of the pattern. I graduated between birds in simple steps, first going with the chickadee because it's the same size, but it is a little bit of a different shape and it has a lot more color blocking. I chose the chickadee because my partner and I used to love watching them on our walks. They are so incredibly cute, and I love the way they say, cheeseburger. Anyway, I drew all my alterations directly on the pattern paper, and then I traced them in a dark black Sharpie line. Most of the time you cut a sewing pattern out, but I wanted to keep mine together as a reference, so I knew I'd be using a light table. I traced my pattern onto the felt in chalk, and the Sharpie lines made that a lot more visible. I made sure all of my cuts were very neat and symmetrical, even though usually I like to keep myself certified laziest sewing girl. And it paid off because I did muck up. I should have kept one of the pieces much larger than the other, but I made the color blocking pieces very small, and then I had to sew them butted up rather than one on top of another. I picked thread colors that made this look like it was blending and it was a feature, not a bug, but I did not include that feature again. Not that it much mattered, this bird was by far the most intricate looking bird. And, thanks to all the little plumping I did on the pattern, the cutest. Such a little baby. I stayed true to the original pattern by making it into 3 main pieces after, of course, the color blocking was finished. There is the back and the 2 sides where the tummies come together. I tried to make sure that all my color blocking came up and over any of the base pieces so that I could catch that in the sewing and not the base color, so I didn't have a stripe down the tummy or something. The 2 stomach halves are sewn together from the tip of the tail to the beak with as neat of a blanket stitch as this certified lazy girl can muster. Though I did always make sure my embroidery thread colors matched. Well, almost always, with one major exception. The birds are stuffed from their only remaining hole firmly from behind. And when they're all together and ready to have the face on, I always put in pins to place the eyes before I sew them on permanently. The only case in which I didn't use matching thread was the crow. Back when my job was corporate enough for a printer, I learned that you can scan something in and then print it at like 130% size. So I put on my pencil skirt and did that at home so we could start with the entire pattern bigger. The crow is black on black on black, and so instead of using a black thread, I used a dark gray because I wanted to add some dimensionality somewhere, especially on the outline so that you could see it from a distance, as a feature this time, not as a bug. This bird has no color blocking, only a slightly different shape, and so I did cut this one out, especially because it's hard to see through black. The pattern pieces tell you to put both tummy halves together, as we did with the chickadee. You then spread it apart and lay it down on top of the top piece, and you're careful to align it because the wings are not the same size, as a feature, not as a bug. Perhaps the strangest thing is that you do have to do a running stitch along each side of the tummy to keep it slim, because if you're going to stuff it from the back, it might migrate into the wings, and you don't want that. Up until this point, I had just sewn on a little square as the beak, but this time I used a couple of scraps and did a proper shaping job to make the maw of the crow. I didn't get any footage of exactly how I did it, but let's be honest, you're not following this tutorial. The last bird I did was a PR stunt for my daughter on behalf of the pigeons. Because come on, we domesticated and then dumped these guys, and don't hate me, they're kind of cute. Anyway, this being my last bird, I had to get a little bit cocky and screw up. I assembled all the color blocking on the 3 main parts as I had always done. But because the stomach and the underside of the wings were a different color, I decided that I could put the wings on the underside of the wings a little bit prematurely and just sew the tummy on. Don't get me wrong, it all went together just fine, and it's all structurally sound and stuff, but the dimensions and the ratios are a little bit squampy, and that's my bad. So while you watch me do this fun little snappy trick, maybe that chickadee didn't teach me my lesson after all. Because you sew that seam along both sides of the stomach to keep the stuffing in, you probably don't technically have to sew the underside of the wings to the top half. But it does add a nice blanket stitch detail, and considering the weird hunched back that my pigeon ended up with, maybe I should stick to color size and shape alterations and not foundational construction methods. But it's okay, none of these birds will be seen from above. They're going to be nice and high to hold that canopy high enough that my kid won't be able to pull it down. I wanted to do a canopy because I wanted some interest higher up on her walls in her room, but because I'm renting, I can't paint. I did briefly consider a traditional canopy, but then I thought I didn't really want to do stripes or a solid color, and I wanted it more custom looking, a little more heirloom quality. Plus we love animals, so this was great. The original reference picture that I used was a genius idea, but I wanted maybe a little bit more of a polished finish. I wanted the birds carrying something very light and breezy and princessy without being too overly princessy, so I've got this like chiffon stuff, not actually sure what it is because I thrifted it, but I cut a piece twice as long as it was wide to start with. Very, very extremely lucky for me, I had just received a serger for my birthday. Happy birthday! And so I didn't have to do a crazy, awful hem on this. I did a very simple square all the way around to start with, and I knew that I would probably change it to get more of a dynamic look. To keep the fabric clean, I wrapped these magnets in some plastic that I got out of the trash, and then I heated it up so that it would be nice and tight around it. In the basement, there are tons of vents and lights and things that I could kind of temporarily hang things from to check it all out. Chains of safety pins worked great to mark height and placement. When I had my first draft ready, I took it upstairs and removed my kid's baby mobile to try it out. I had it hung from the ceiling with command hooks and fishing line, and I'm going to do this canopy the same way. I use loops of fishing line of various lengths, and it's great because if I need to shorten one, I can just tie another knot in, and it's not like you're going to see the fishing line up there anyway. I was trying real hard to decipher all of my little safety pin codes, but I attached these swingy command hooks in roughly the right place and did my best. The hardest part was just being short, but isn't that the story of my life? And this is just a first draft anyway. Alright, so I've decided I've got it the way I like it in terms of how it's draping. I am going to cut off some of that there because I don't want her to be able to reach it from her bed. I also need to decide which birds are going where. I'm thinking blue in the front and yellow in the middle. Crow here, pigeon here, or maybe swap them and the chickadee at the corner. I think we'll try that. While it was hanging, I marked some of the spots where I wanted to trim it, and when I took it downstairs, I just connected those with a rough line. It's not like this is going to be laid out flat. No one's going to know that it's all swervy like this. Then I went right in and serged it, and unfortunately, I was coming up on the time where I'd have to actually figure out how to attach these birds to this thing. I'm going to lay out my birds now. Not super sure how I'm going to attach them to things. I think the safety pins are a fine way to have the birds hanging from the string, maybe. It's not permanent if I don't like it. Yes, baby Camille, safety pins are not permanent. Which is nice if this is your first for YouTube project and you're a little bit nervous about it, but you're already using them as marking tools and they're not very reliable. I want the yellow... Wait. Why do I have extra pins? Crap. Which one goes where? Okay, well, I think I'm going to try yellow in the back because it's not a real bird. You're real enough for me, baby. Because that one is like an actual bird that lives here. And I think this one is the extra. So we're just going to take it out and hope that doesn't muck everything up. It didn't. And girl, you're lucky. Anyways, I couldn't very well just sit around and wait until I had a solution. In any case, I knew whatever I used would have to attach to the birds somehow, so I attached these little jump rings to all of their stitching. And lucky for me, they all had a very convenient center tummy seam. As I was doing this, it came to me. I have a ton of these little friendship bracelet closures. They're simple, impermanent, interchangeable, and they work on tension, which is exactly what my birds are going to be doing. So I continued on adding jump rings. I figured I could be clever and make them look like they're diving or swooping or swerving by changing where I put them on the body. I could make it look like some were holding it in their beak in the case of this chickadee, or maybe holding it with their feet like with the crow or something. And because I still wasn't sure, I wanted to make sure that the bird itself could also be attached in impermanent way, so I did a hook on the top. I attached it with the line, and then a hook, a loop, the bird, a loop, the friendship bracelet hook, and then the fabric that they're carrying. Because of the tension, the hooks on the top and bottom of the bird will be connected by an invisible line which will dictate the position that the bird is in. I did all of the birds a little bit different to reflect their kind of species, and spoiler alert, the crow looks bad, but I still haven't fixed it. You know what? Probably never will, let's be honest. But the toggle clasps, those were genius. Those were super genius. I've even switched some of the birds around since, and it was easy. Okay, so now that I'm here, I'm like, does it look awful? It's just kind of like piddly. Maybe it just doesn't photograph well. It's just kind of, it's way up there. It's kind of cute. It just almost feels like it's not enough. I don't know if I should add like birds around, or maybe what I should do is I should add some more like a traditional canopy back there and tuck it behind the bed. Yeah, that might do it. In my infinite insecurity, I used the Macara Tours method of measuring, and I added a little bit of the canopy to the back. More friendship bracelet closures came to my rescue. These magnets will make it so that even if my kid does pull on them, they will just break off, kind of like a cat collar. Because I wanted it to be cute, but I needed it to be safe. And it did turn out grander, and I think it's just fine. My daughter loves the birds in her room. And not only is it a perfectly acceptable renter-friendly bird canopy, it also deserves your like, subscribe, and your watching of the next video. Don't you think? I think so. I think so.